Good morning, guys. Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid and another morning ramble. Today, we're going to talk about focusing on what we have, not on what we want. You can probably tell by the way these rambles go that most days I have no clue what I'm going to talk about, sometimes until I get up here at our little campground. I wake up in the mornings. I always have 2 cups of coffee. The first one is to just kind of wake up, and I don't turn on any computers or anything like that. That's time completely for myself to wake up slowly. When the weather's nice, I always have it outside, usually on the front porch, so I can stare at the pond, see the deer or whatever, Mr. J's blue heron, if he's in this early, whatever's out there to greet me as I wake. Then I'll go in, get my second cup, and I'll start maybe reading through some comments or something on the channel, start planning my day. But I usually have no idea what I'm going to talk about when I come up here. It's not scripted, as you can tell. This is why I sidetrack sometimes. I mean, I just kind of wing it, guys. There's no script here in front of me. There's a cup of coffee, that's it. But I'll often get ideas. Yeah, this is my second cup of coffee. I have it up here with you guys. Sometimes somebody will leave a comment that'll kind of make me remember something about my past or give me an idea to talk about. And as you know, if you've been following, I don't just make up what I talk about. I always base it on experiences. And so I was reading in the comments this morning, and a guy named Michael. Hello, Michael. This is your shout out. He left a comment on a video that my family and I made about a week or so ago about how we go out and we actually go tree hunting here on the homestead because we have this nursery. We may or may not start a nursery, but we're kind of hedging our bets just in case we do decide to start a nursery. That's the kind of thing you've got to plan out many years in advance. So we're just getting dozens and dozens, well, hundreds of trees now, from cuttings, from potting up seedlings and saplings, and actually growing them from nuts. I'll put that video on the end of this one so you can see what I'm talking about. But 5 years from now, we're either going to start a nursery with literally what will be thousands of trees by then, because we probably have over 1,000 little baby oak trees just in one garden spot down here now, or we're just going to have a lot of beautiful trees that we're not going to start a nursery with, but that we'll probably plant around on our homestead or maybe give away to friends. But Michael commented on this video. He said, I wish I had more permanent roots like you so I could, plant trees and nurture them and watch them grow. And he said, my fiance and I are getting ready to graduate, and they're not really certain. He's telling his story. Basically, it's a young couple getting ready to graduate, not certain where they're going to go, what they're going to do, where they're going to work. And, folks, for those of you who, like myself, are past middle age, doesn't that just kind of remind us of where we were 20 years ago or maybe longer for some of you, and it seems like yesterday? Well, Michael, what I will tell you is that when I was your age, I always had the fantasy and the dream of having some land out in the country like this, having a water source with fish in it like we have here with the pond, being able to grow trees, gardens, all these things, having deer in my yard, turkeys. We've seen turkeys in this big oak tree back here behind me. What I will tell you is that when I thought this dream at times was so far away it would never happen, that's when it was actually the closest and soonest actually coming to fruition. Just a few short years ago, I was stuck in the Philippines, down and out, and thought I'd never see the United States again. And then here I am, boom, fast forward just a few short years, and it had happened. When, 20 years ago, I was literally living about 16 miles away from here. And I was further away from having this happen. This life I have now happened then, even though I was 16 miles away, than I was when I was 9,000 miles away and had no money, no hope. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? How do you go from being the farthest away from your dream and your fantasy to, getting there versus being 16 miles down the road and being, not even being close to having it? Well, it's mindset. It's how you it's for me, it was how I thought, it was my worldview. But there's something when we look at where we are now, okay, let's not worry about the future for now. Let's not focus on the past for now. Let's think about today. Let's think about right now. And right now, let's focus on what we have, not what we want. This is a magical technique that, again, I've not always been able to implement at all times. Sometimes I can more effectively than other times. You know, a lot of folks talked about this yesterday. It's easy for me to sit here and say this now because I'm in a really good spot where I want to be. I'm at home. I don't have a job that makes me miserable. I'm with my family full time. So yes, it is easier for me to do this now than it was, let's say, a month ago when I had a job that I hated that made me miserable, and there was a lot of, but what I've found is that if I can just get in a spot every day to where I can focus on what I have instead of what I want, it kind of slows things down and it makes me more appreciative. You know, I've talked many times about the attitude of gratitude, coming up with 5 things at the beginning of every day for which I'm grateful, to allow me to focus on the good as opposed to the not so much good. And Michael, what I've found, and the main point of this, is that not that it makes things happen quicker or it doesn't make things get good sooner. What it does is it allows me to appreciate the good things I already have that I might be overlooking. I'm going to give you an example. Just yesterday evening, me and Dearly and Daniel, the American version of the name, in the Philippines where I was born, it's Danielle for the male, and then the female is Daniela. So sometimes here around the house, it kind of comes out as Danielle. Really embarrasses him when it happens in public, because here that's the female version. It's Daniel is the male version. So me, Daniel, and Dearly were up here last night. We have a fire. Dearly ate her 3 or 4 s'mores. She says 3, I say 4, because her last s'more she made twice as big. But she's a tiny little thing and never sticks to her, so it doesn't matter. So we're sitting up here marveling the beauty, this beautiful homestead, which Michael said he'd love to have. And here I'm sitting here and I'm looking around, and I said, you know what, hon? I would love to have 50 acres, because we have 6. I said, I'd love to have 50 acres. I'd love to have a house in the middle of my 50 acres so you can't see the road, you can't see the neighbor's property. It's like we're living, and she looks at me and she's like, are you nuts? Are you crazy? She says, look at this. Why would you ever want anything more than this? And she helped me catch myself, and I thought, wow. And here I was 6 months ago panicking because, revenues from my writing and stuff had gone so far south. They had actually bottomed at the time, but we weren't sure. So I had to go get it. Well, I chose to go get a job because I didn't want to lose what I'd worked so hard for many years to get. And guys, I don't think I ever pointed this out. Being willing to do what needed to be done to take care of my family wasn't just as so much about keeping what we had, which was the homestead and the house and all these things, but it was about preserving what I'd worked so hard for so many years to get. And I think I've kind of covered this in some of my other videos, like the one about how no one owes us anything, but here's how we can have everything. I gave the analogy of how somebody just gives you a house or they just give you a car. It really means nothing. And if something happens to where, let's say they purchase it for you, but there's a payment plan and they just kind of turn that house over to you, and they also turn the payments over to you, or a car, and you can't make them, you just be like, oh well, so what? Let the bank come get it, because it means nothing to you because you did nothing to earn it. But when you're the one that put in the work, when you're the guy that's stuck on an island 9,000 miles away with no hope of ever seeing your native country again, but you actually make it work out to where you do get here and you do get a place like this, when those payments become threatened, you will work 12 hours a day at a job you hate, 7 days a week where you're mistreated for as long as you must to keep what you have, because it's not so much that you're keeping what you have at the time as it is you are keeping what you've worked. I view this homestead as 8 long years of being called irresponsible for actually thinking I could pursue my passion, which is writing, and making a career out of it. I view this, when I see this place, I see people in my life leaving me because they didn't want to stick around during my low points because they just wrote me off as dead. I see people turning their backs on me because I wasn't pursuing professions they felt I should be pursuing because I was pursuing my passions. And I see a beautiful young Filipino woman and a beautiful little boy with big fat cheeks who stood beside me while everybody else left. That's why I worked so hard at a job I hated for so long to keep this. That's what I was keeping. So anyway, see there, I digressed. I told you at the beginning, I don't script this, and that's why I veer off. So anyway, Michael. I actually wrote many years ago on a piece of paper, I wrote, focus on what you have, not what you want. And I stuck this on my refrigerator. And it's strange. School doesn't start until next week, and my son's school bus just stopped at the front of our driveway. I hope we're not a week late for school. No, we're not. Maybe he's, Rick, the bus driver, he drops plants off for us. Yeah, he's going again. I think he probably dropped some plants off there at the driveway. I'll go check later. But what happens is that, and Dearly brought me back, and see, I ramble, but I finally get back on point after a few minutes. Dearly brought me back to viewing what I have here. This amazingly beautiful 5.78462 acres, which we just always call 6 acres. The work we've put into it in 2 years, the hundreds of trees we've planted on our tree lines, the thousands we've got in pots or in little planting parts around various parts of the homestead where we're growing them directly in the ground. Our happiness. You know, my son was up here kicking one ball, hitting the other with a baseball bat, and she was shoving s'mores down her face, and I was wishing maybe I was 20 years younger so I could do the same thing and not have to pay the health consequences of doing that. When we focus on what we have and not what we want, for me, I've found that I become automatically satisfied. And something else I learned to say on top of this is that if this is good as it gets, if this is as good as it ever gets, I'm completely okay with that. And Michael, this is when magical things started happening for me. We were in the Philippines. We were not even in a city. We were way out in what they call the provinces, which is what we call the country. And we were way out. I mean, way out. And it was a type of place where we had electricity. There for a long time we didn't, but we got to a point in a small community where we had electricity, but they would turn it off 8 or 10 hours a day to conserve it because, you know, they just, it was a third world country, and this is just how life is in many third world countries. Sometimes they'll just shut off the power for half the day to make sure that they have enough power reserves to give you power tomorrow. It was a difficult lifestyle. I'm thin now. You guys see me, you know I'm not that big. A lot of folks have commented that I need to put some weight on, and I have gained a little bit since quitting the job there at the post office. I was 20 pounds lighter back then than I am now. But I had Dearly. Daniel was a baby. We had each other. We were planting, you know, vegetables, and it was a year-round season, growing season there because it's tropical. So we had vegetables constantly growing in our yard. We could eat almost anything that grew in the wild. We had fruit trees. My favorite fruit over there was papaya. It's still one of my favorite fruits today. I remember I ate a papaya once and just threw all the seeds on the ground, and just a few short months later we had a papaya tree with ripe papayas on it. Our needs were met. We had each other. We loved each other as we do today. And I realized, you know, if this is as good as it ever gets, I'm perfectly okay with that. And that brought a sense of calm over me. A sense of calm I never had here in the U.S. Years before this, when I was successful by everybody else's standards. You know, I had the college degree. I had a professional job, was a stockbroker for 8 years. I was structured into the middle class socioeconomically, lived in a nice middle class subdivision. All my neighbors were middle class professionals with college degrees and all these things. And I was not too happy a lot of the times back then. But here I was on this little island with a beautiful young lady who loved me, a beautiful, healthy, happy son who loved me, Never thought I'd ever make it back to the United States again. Didn't have electricity half the time. The majority of the food we ate, we were growing ourselves, but I was okay with that because it was delicious. And as you've seen from my wife's cooking videos, she can cook one thing 1,000 different ways. And I said to myself, you know, if this is as good as it ever gets, I'm completely okay with this. And I focused on what I had, not what I wanted. That brought that sense of calm, which allowed me, and again, I was writing, I was pursuing my passion. It unclogged any, you know, the channels were clogged with stress and anxiety and regret and remorse and all these things, depression, anger, fear. Once all that was gone, because I was able to just stay in the moment, focus on my blessings, not consider any burdens, and just be happy and be at peace with myself and the world as it was around me, magical things started happening. Acceptance. I guess this is called acceptance. And, you know, you hear older people talk, Michael, about don't wish your life away. You know, I was wishing a lot of my life away. And right now, I said earlier when I saw Rick's bus stopping, school starts next week. I know a lot of folks are ready for their kids to go back to school. They can't wait. Not me. I mean, I've never been like that. Now, I don't dread school coming back and me having to put Daniel on that bus every morning and wait the long 7 or 8 hours for him to get back. But I know the time's coming, and so for now, we're focusing on what we have, which is some more time together before that time comes. And that's why, like, for instance, yesterday evening, you might have watched the video, we came up here and hung out here at the campground. We ate dinner up here. Even though it was cooked in the house, prepared in the house, we packed it up in Tupperware containers and brought it up here and ate outside and had a fire, played ball. And we're probably going to do that again today. I mean, we probably won't make a video of it. We don't video that type of thing every time we do it because that's the kind of thing we do every day, but we just thought we would yesterday. But I'm focusing on what I have, you know, and I'm focusing on what I have today. So Michael, I hope this helps. I don't know if I made any sense. I don't really know what the point was other than it is peaceful if we can get to the point to where we focus on what we have instead of what we want. We don't wish our lives away. You know, Dearly and I will often watch movies on Amazon Prime on the laptop. We don't have TV, we don't have cable, and we rarely rent movies. You know, we pay the annual membership for Prime, and so most of what we watch are the free movies that come with the Prime membership. Sometimes they're not that good, but sometimes we're pleasantly surprised. And we watched one just a few nights ago that pleasantly surprised us. It was called About Time. And it's interesting because the family's last name in this movie was Lake, just like ours. And that's the only time I've ever seen that in a movie. But the setting is in England, takes place in England. And it's kind of like a romantic comedy. It's about time travel. It's like the men in this family have the ability to travel back in time. I'd recommend you guys watch this movie if you haven't seen it. But the main character, he's a young man. Starts out, he's like 20-ish, follows him up until he's about 30. And his father shares this gift with him, tells him, you know, when he comes of age, what he can do. And he goes back and showing how he tries to fix things, tries to make things better. But the point of the story is there towards the end of the movie, you realize it's not about going back and changing things so you can become wealthy. It's about understanding that if you have the ability to focus on what you have and not what you want, you'll kind of see that you already are wealthy. You know, this guy's father, the son finds out at the end of the movie, the only thing that his father really did or found it worth doing when he could travel back in time was to continue to go back in time to enjoy those special moments with his son and with his family. This guy's passion, like mine, was his family. And we loved that movie because it reminded us a lot of ourselves. You know, they lived on a little estate beside the ocean. It was like, wow, that's like us, except we're out in the country and we have this little homestead. And they were just always together, always doing things together. They didn't really care about the rest of the world. And it was just beautiful. So go watch that movie if you haven't. It's called About Time. And Michael, I'm going to tell you this one last point here before I go, because I've got a lot of weeding to do. Dearly and Daniel's going to be waking up soon. When I was in your position, right out of school, I was in my early 20s, I was renting. I couldn't really do a lot of the things I wanted to. But I did get permission from my landlord to plant a little tree in the little yard of a little rental house I had, and that little house is 16 miles away from here. I planted a little holly tree. I planted a holly tree because I saw it at Kroger, which is a local grocery store chain here on the east coast of the U.S., and they have these holly trees at Christmas time for $19.99. It's like every year they have them. And our first year here on the homestead, a couple of winters ago, we bought 11 of these and planted a row of them along our fence that comes up from the beginning of our driveway so that it'll form a privacy hedge. So I remember this tree I planted in 1999, which is 19 years ago from right now, when I first came to the Charlottesville area. And so after we planted our trees here on the homestead, we went back to look at that little holly tree. It was about 1.5 feet high, 18 inches high, that I planted 19 years ago. I lived in that little rental house for about another year after that, left. Can't remember ever really going back because it was in a part of the community that I just never passed through again. Me and Dearly and Daniel went by. I said, let's go see if that tree's still there and let's see what it looks like so we can see what we might get to look forward to here in 20 years. Should we still be here? Should these trees live? Should they thrive? We went back, or I went back. They went for the first time, and I pulled up into the little road that goes right by that rental house, and I was able to park beside the road within 20 feet of that tree. And that tree was 25 feet high. It was as wide as that little house. It was huge, it was majestic, and it was beautiful. And I was able to say, I planted that tree, 17 years ago at the time, but it's been 19 years ago now. Almost 20 years later, that tiny little 18-inch tree that I planted is huge and it's beautiful. So Michael, go ahead and start your trees in pots if you're not where you're going to be permanently. As you move, take your potted trees with you. But if you can, where you lay your roots for a little bit, even if it's just temporarily because you're renting, see if you can get permission to plant a tree there and do it. Go plant that tree. 20 years from now, when you're my age, go back and take a look at that tree and think about everything that's transpired in your life from that point until now for me. Guys, it's worth planting a tree, even if you're not going to be the one there to enjoy it daily. Somebody's going to enjoy it, and you can always go back and see it yourself. So this one's a little longer than usual. Apologize for that if it's too long for you. But I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope that throughout your day you can kind of focus on what you have, not what you want. And that doing so helps you realize you're already rich, you're already wealthy, you already have an amazing life. So with all this said, I'm going to give you a beautiful parting shot on Homestead, and we'll see you next time.